NCAA tournament is in the books for 2024. I have so many thoughts on this. I have so many thoughts, starting with who is the outstanding wrestler? Now, who is the outstanding wrestler? So many times, guys, the people that vote on OW, outstanding wrestler, big deal within the wrestling community. That will stick around forever. Forever. You're talking about, essentially, just so you know, the GOAT of the tournament. But outstanding wrestler of the tournament turns into outstanding wrestler in the tournament. All the time. Very hard to get around. Very hard to get coaches who agree with me in an environment like this where they're being calm and they're being rational. But then when it's time to vote, they will go with the outstanding wrestler in the tournament. For example, if you are an NCAA champion, every tournament you enter the following year, you will win outstanding wrestler, as long as there's no other NCAA champions in the tournament. Every tournament you enter, you will win outstanding wrestler. Because when it's time to vote, they will go with outstanding wrestler in the tournament. Who's the best guy that entered, as opposed to outstanding wrestler of the tournament? Who, within this whistle to whistle, wrestled the best? And I'll never get a bronze medalist there. I just won't. It is a distinction that gets reserved for champions. Like when it's time to vote OW, outstanding wrestler, they will wait till the end of the tournament. They'll look at everybody that won, but then you're just from that field. There's 12 weight classes. You'll look at those 12 champions as a way of determining it. But I don't know that it accurately answers the question. Like if you're going to tell me that Ryan Crooklyn wasn't the outstanding wrestler, I'm going to have a big problem with that. Ryan Crooklyn's draw is criminal. The end. They gave Ryan Crooklyn, who was undefeated 18-0, conference champion, the number 2 seed. And the reason that's relevant is that puts him on the same side of the bracket as Vito. Now, Vito is not only much older. It's Vito's 7th year, by the way. Crooklyn's a redshirt freshman. Vito is the defending NCAA champion. And while being the defending champion, he is the reigning world champion. So the intimidation and the likelihood of Crooklyn being able to beat Vito is completely stacked against him. But Crooklyn did beat him very early in the season. Then he beat him again very late in the season, known as the conference championship. So Crooklyn, only reward for beating the reigning world champion twice, when he gets put on the same side of the bracket, his only reward is that he's going to have to do it a 3rd time. Now, that never should have happened. Crooklyn should have been up top. Fix and Vito should have been on the bottom. Not maybe. For sure. So not only do they put Crooklyn on the bottom, they give him the toughest draw. Now, the toughest draw could be argued the day that it came out. It cannot be argued now. Crooklyn in the quarters had Nasir Bailey from Little Rock. In the quarters, that's who Crooklyn had. Now, Nasir Bailey was the hardest draw of any of the guys that won in the quarters. That's not an opinion. That's provable now that it's over. We all knew this going in, but you could still argue. You can't now, because Nasir Bailey and Crooklyn rematched for 3rd. Only one guy came through the backside that lost in the quarters, and it was Nasir Bailey, who was Crooklyn's draw. Crooklyn, who is 18-0 and had beaten the world champion twice. Not only does he get the seed that he's supposed to get, he then has the hardest draw, and he still found a way. And you won't hear him complaining or telling the story the way that I'm telling it right now. He didn't say anything. He went out there, he handled his business, and when he got his heart broken, which was suffering a loss to a guy who he'd beaten twice throughout the season, he didn't complain once. He regrouped and he came back for 3rd. And he absolutely should be considered for outstanding wrestler, but it doesn't work that way. You cannot be on the backside. I remember the year when it happened to Hidley, and Jason Nolf himself said he should have had a takedown. But there's no way that you can bring a guy back from that side of the bracket and put him, even when you start to talk about, well, we had Fix and we had Vito in the finals, and both of them have been in college for 7 years because we had that thing called COVID, and then they understood what an Olympic red shirt was. Then they had their normal red shirt year, and then we ran it like, before you even get to the fact that 4 guys who in a normal circumstance, college age, Crooklyn beat them all, was the champion. Before you even get to that, okay. Now let's look at the finals because that's all we're ever going to be allowed to. Starocci came into the tournament, another guy whose seed was criminal. And there's a little bit of a criteria that they must follow. And criteria for seeding for what you must follow is done for a good reason, but I've never seen it work out. I just personally haven't seen it. We have it right here in Oregon for our state tournament. I mean, to explain to you the mess that it creates. And the NCAA doesn't have, it's not absolute hard and fast. There still is a little wiggle room where an adult in the room can speak up as long as he can find other adults in the room to create a loud and powerful voice. But at any rate, they take Starocci and they make him the number 9 seed. Now, the problem with that was the reason they did it where everybody knew Starocci is the guy. But because they wanted to avoid future defaults at a conference tournament, they were going to use Starocci to prove to the world, we will count those as matches. And if you forfeit, we will count those as losses. And all losses are created the same. And to prove that we're serious, we're going to put you at number 9. Great. I get that. I actually like and support that. I hate the default as much as anybody. When I tell you it's criminal, though, it's not an opinion. Because now you want to turn to the number 1 guy. And if you really wanted a litmus test on, is this right or is this wrong, you would turn to the number 1 guy, your number 1 seed, who is Mekhi Lewis, and you would say to him, do you want Starocci in the quarterfinals? Or at random, would you like somebody else? Of the 32 guys here, would you like us to guarantee you don't have Starocci? We don't know who you will have, but you won't have him. And he would say, of course I want that guarantee. Of course, I, as a national champion, should not meet up in the quarterfinals with last year's national champion, who, by the way, I wrestled for the national championship last year. We should not rematch last year's championship match in the quarterfinals. But it's what they did. And what does the winner get? The winner of that match gets to go to the semis and face an NCAA champion. That's right, they put 3 NCAA champions on the same side. And we all knew that was wrong. We knew it was wrong, and we said that it was wrong. And we heard the debates as to why it's not. But now it's done, and we were right. Now it's provable. Now that it's done, and Shane Griffith came through and got 3rd place, we have now proven those 3 guys should not have been on the same side. Now that Starocci, who we all knew should be seeded 1, and who we all knew was number 1, now that he is in fact number 1, we see the mistakes made with the seeding, but nobody ever wants to wear that, right? Somebody was in the seeding room that knew Starocci should be 1. And somebody didn't speak up because somebody else said, no, he forfeited the Big Tens and he should not be number 1. So they allowed this to happen, and it's a mistake. It's a massive mistake. And when you look at Starocci and you're going to tell me you're not going to give him the outstanding wrestler, he had to defeat 2 NCAA champions just to get to the finals. In the finals, the second best guy in the country can't score a point on him. And I've heard the argument, well, Starocci goes out there, he's got a freshman, he only can beat him by 2 points. He can only beat him by 2 points. The score was 2-0. The second best guy in all of America, within the time constraints of an NCAA match, couldn't get a point. Not one. That's the compliment to Starocci, and that's before you get into he's compromised and he's hurt in his knee and he's never quite wrestled like this. Before you get into any of that, on a bad day, on that day, the second best guy cannot, within 7 minutes, get a single point. There's your outstanding wrestler. But they didn't give it to him. In fact, he wasn't even really considered for it. And if you were to look at what Carr did, Carr having to overcome not only last year's championship, but this year, as in 2 weeks ago, conference championship. And Carr had to overcome that and find a way to beat O'Toole. And the only reward he got for beating O'Toole is that he draws into Messenbrink, who, by the way, Messenbrink, as the freshman, is the one that should have had to jump on that grenade. Whether it was Carr Messenbrink in the semis or Messenbrink O'Toole in the semis, it should not have been Carr and O'Toole, who is last year's finals match, both of them champions, on the same side of the bracket. It shouldn't have been that way. No matter how this is written down and no matter what the clause is, there should have been somebody that was good enough at arguing and could pull enough reality and logic into it to have separated them, but they didn't do it. And Carr went out there and he found a way anyway, not once, but twice. And that should have really been looked at for outstanding wrestler. And I don't want to take away from Aaron Brooks. That isn't my intent. Aaron Brooks had enough praise, though. He got the main event spot on ESPN. It's not as though a credit and appreciation isn't shown to Brooks. He got the main event spot. They ran the heavyweights out there first so they could go through the whole gamut and feature Brooks. All right, make sure to add that part of the story because I'm not attempting to take away. He got a number of really good things, but then you have an Outstanding Wrestler Award. And that entire tournament, they were going to give that to Brooks as long as he won. They had built him and made him the main event before we ever blew the very first whistle. And I'm just sharing for you, what's the point of doing it? If it's already predetermined, it's already decided, what's the point of doing it? And Aaron Brooks, who David Taylor himself, who Kyle Snyder himself says is the second best wrestler in the world. If you can get out of the country, get past Brooks, you're very likely to win the gold medal. Just might be the best wrestler in the tournament. That's not what the award was for. It was for the best wrestler of the tournament. So now, like so many other things, I have to fix it. And I have to tell you who the best wrestler, whose performance, who mentally and physically, who overcame when it was hard, who did things that they weren't supposed to do. Not that they went right along with the script and they were the favorite, where they weren't the favorite. They had to overcome, they had to pick themselves up because they wanted it and they found a way. And that outstanding wrestler was David Carr.